Good morning, everyone. We are going to learn about web programming today. Then, say what is actually client-server programming? In a client-server programming, client is a browser and server is also an program which process the request that is sent by the client. So client-server model computing is a model of software design in which you write two separate programs, a client program and a server program. Web clients are browser applications wherein these browser applications sends HTTP request to the server through internet. Server is always running process and that it waits for the connection, data or the request from the multiple clients. And when the requests are received from various clients to the server, these these requests are processed by the server and the server responds back, and thus the response is the form of HTTP response, and that response is given to the client through internet. So for sending the HTTP request, user runs the web client program such as browser and makes a connection to the web server elsewhere on the internet to obtain the information. So browser understands only HTML language. Through HTML and through HTTP request, it sends the HTTP protocol, it sends the request to the server. So the language that is spoken by web clients and servers, that is the standard protocols used for web communication, is HTTP, that is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And this HTTP is written on the top of TCP and IP protocol suite. That means it relies on TCP and IP to carry out its lower level communication functionalities. The TCP IP responsibility is to route the or to deliver the message TCP. But whereas the HTTP does not deal with routing, it only sends the request and it retrieves the response. I'll repeat, HTTP only sends the request and retrieves the response, but routing of the message packets is the responsibility of TCP protocol. And HTTP is written on the top of TCP and IP. HTTP is known as stateless protocol because it does not keep tracks of information from one client to another client or one request to another. And the request we send is through URL. See, when you type the URL in the text bar, that means that you need information of that web page. You are requesting to send that web page to the client browser. So that is done using the URL. So some of the URLs are long set of variables and values chained as part of the request to provide some sort of state information. So if you see this URL, HTTP is the protocol and www.spinspire.com is the domain name, and the course, that is web development dev and coherent.fall 2021 is a query stream, and fragment is the footer. A location that is this part is the location within this web page. This hash footer is the location within the web page. So this is all about your URL. URL contains a protocol. In our case, it is HTTPS. S stands for secure. HTTPS protocol and a domain name and the query strings and the location within the web page. To main So other alternative to maintain the state is using of cookies. So this is the internet, and the internet is the vast network that connects computer all over the world. Sometimes it is referred to as network of networks. The communication between the client and the server consists of series of connections. And the type of internet service you choose will largely depend on which internet service provider serve your area along with the type of service they offer. And most of the systems on the internet run Unix, that is a multi-user operating system, and many of the original internet protocols. And such protocols includes Telnet, File Transfer Protocol, Gopher, SMTP, which is nothing but Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, and NNTP. These are all protocols which are used. Next topic, TCP connections sockets. What do you mean by sockets? Sockets provide point-to-point two-way communication flow across an internet protocol-based computer such as internet. Sockets are endpoints for the communication. They build communication between two nodes. For building communication between two nodes, we require sockets. Socket programming is a way of connecting two nodes. I'll repeat, socket programming is a way of connecting two nodes on the network to communicate with each other. If the host and the server wants to communicate with each other, that is our client program, and the server want to communicate with each other, then we require socket. And remember when we are talking about socket, it is a software socket but not hardware socket. The way socket works is, if you want to communicate with a particular web server, all the web servers have names, numbers, and applications. These different applications on the server are listening on what are called port numbers. So each application process on different port numbers, and that port number is bind to the application. The port number is a way to identify a specific process to which an internet or other network messages is to be forwarded when it arrives at the server. So different common TCP ports are Telnet for logins. They listen at port number 23. SSH, that is which is used for secure login, they'll use 22 port number. HTTP listens at 80. HTTPS listens at port number 443. SMTP listens at port number 25. And for retrieving mail, we use a protocol called as IMAP, which listens at port number 143, 220, and 993. And for mail retrieval, we use a protocol called as POP, and they listen at port number 109 and 110. Next, socket programming using Python. Python has built-in support for TCP sockets. So if you want to develop a TCP socket programming, first you need to import a module called as import socket. And you need to use these functions inside your program: socket, connect, send, and receive. And since we want to retrieve HTTP protocol web pages, we are using port number 80. So my socket, I am assigning the socket when the socket function is written it gives an object, mySocket object, okay, and it takes two arguments, socket.af underscore inet and sock.sock underscore stream. These two parameters the socket function have. Af underscore inet means that it refers to the address family. You have different address families like IPv4 and IPv6. So we are using IPv4 address family. So using the socket function, we are creating the socket. See, when using socket function, we are just creating the socket, but we have not established the connection to the host. To establish the connection to the host, you are using a function called as connect. And inside the connect, you are using a website called as, or a URL called as data.pr4e.org. Any website you can, any URL you can use. So this is my simple socket program, wherein first of all, I am importing the socket. Next, I am calling the socket function. After creating the socket, I am using connect function, and inside the connect function, I am using the domain name. And after that, I am using the get method. See, you have two methods like get method and post method. When you are using get method, that means that you want to retrieve data from the server, or if you are using post method, you want to post something to the server. So this is a simple layman definition, actually, when to use get method and when to use post method. If you have confidential data to be sent to the server, then use post data. Else, use get method. Use post method if you are having confidential data. If you are having, if you are not having any confidential data and the data to be sent is very small, in that case, use get method, right? And the entire path is this one. I am using the data pr4e.org. Under that, I am having the location is romeo.txt. And I am using HTTP protocol. And say when you retrieve the data, it gives two parts. The response will be in two parts. The first part will be the header part, and the second part will be the actual content. There will be two lines different between the header part and the content part. That's why we are giving two written carriages and two new lines in my command. And this code, actually the Python strings contains Unicodes, but we want to send the data in UTF-8 format. So you need to encode this. And all this string I am assigning to a variable called as CMD. So after creating the connection, I am sending my command to the server. After that means I am sending the request to the server. After sending the request to the server process it and it sends the response. The response is to be received using the function called as recv. So how many bytes of data you want to read? Here I want to read only 512 bytes of data. So until all the data we have read, we keep this in a while loop, okay, while true, and we are receiving the data 512 bytes of data. If no more data is there to be read, I am breaking from the loop. And when the data is retrieved, I am printing the data in, and before printing the data, I am decoding the data. Because it is in UTF-8 format, again I want to print this in a Unicode format. After reading all the data and our work is done, we need to close the socket descriptor. Right? Let us execute this program and I'll show you. Before executing this program, let me show you Actually, what is there in this website romeo.txt, data pr for org romeo.txt. See what is there in this. So this is having this type of text here. So we need to retrieve this text. So let me run this program. See the program here, the same program. So I'll run this program and I'll show you. See here I am getting content type, and here I am getting bad request. Why I don't know. One more time, let me run and show you. Copy paste this program. So yes, see, we are getting two parts here. One is the header part, and again the content part. We can able to retrieve the content here if you can able to see. Yes, the content part has been retrieved here. Right? If you see the header part, it is giving when we have given the request, what is the server, when it is last modified, when the server web page has been last modified, and what is the accept range, what is the content length, everything, all the information is given in header part. And after displaying the header, you are getting the actual content. Right? Yes. So this is the second example, wherein instead of in the previous example, in the program itself, I have given my URL. But if you, the second one is read the URL from at the command prompt and split wherever I forward slash is there. Then I am assigning to a variable called as words, and I am retrieving words of 2. See here in this URL, http data pr4e.org. http word of 0 contains http, word of 1 contains the empty space here. It will be split, and words of 2 contains data.pr4e.org. So now my host contains data.pr4e.org. Now the next step is call the socket function, then call the connect method and send the request. When sending the request, concatenate the URL, get method and HTTP request. After concatenating, encode it and place it as a parameter inside the send function. Then after sending the request, now our next step is receiving the response. So again, for that we are using while loop, infinite loop, and receive the response using RECEB function. And again, I am using 512 bytes of data for reading the data. 512 bytes of data here. And if no more data is there, break from the loop. And if the data is there, print the data, and before printing, decode it. And once you are done with the work, close the socket descriptor. So here we have used socket function. We have a module in Python called as urllib. This URL lib reduces the complexities that are there in socket function. So URL lib is a library that wraps the socket stuff and does it for us automatically. automatically. So the URL lib module provides functions to download the data from given URLs. And this URL lib uses a function called as URL open, which enables to fetch URLs using a variety of different protocols. URL lib is a package that collects several modules for working with URLs, such as it contains different modules called as URL lib.request for opening and reading. Both we use URL lib.request both for opening as well as for reading. And we have another module called as URL lib.parse for parsing URLs. Parsing means breaking your string into tokens. So if you have a long string, each string is broken into singular words. Breaking the sentence into words or tokens is called as parsing. This module helps to define functions to manipulate URLs and their component parts to build or break them. Say, for example, first import all the modules that are there under URL lib.parse. Then parse this URL and just print it. Let us execute these 3 lines and see what happens. One minute. So we have imported all the modules of URL lib. Next step, use URL parser. And let me print this parse underscore URL. See, this URL has been parsed. The first scheme is HTTP. Then the net location is data.prv4.org. The path is romeo.txt. So each and every token has been passed here. There are no queries, so you got empty string here. And there are no parameters for params also, you got empty string. That whatever you are parsing, that you are getting as words. Then you have another module called as URL lib.error for the exceptions raised. And URL lib.error module defines the classes for exception raised when URL lib.requests. So whenever there are errors in URL lib.request, then this module is used. That means whenever there is an error in fetching the URL, this module helps in raising the exceptions. So the same thing, see here. There is no socket functions, no need to remember the address families, no need to remember what type of protocol you need to use. Everything is taken care by URL lib. The complex program has reduced. See how it has been reduced. So we are importing a URL lib.request. urllib.parse and urllib.error modules, and we are opening this URL using URL open function, and it returns a file handler. That means it returns all the lines. So we'll write one by one here. Let me run these 2 lines first and I'll show you what happens. And let me print this file handle. Socket file descriptor. So you are getting a HTTP response object. Yeah. So it is a pointer to this web page. So there are number of lines. I want to iterate through the content of this HTTP data pr4e.org. So I am using for loop. Okay. And I'll print the lines. And before printing, I want to use strip and see what is the use of strip in this program. Let me print only the decoded lines. So the lines has been displayed. Now when I say strip, that means each word is divided into word and it is saved to the list. Now let's see the difference. What happened? Okay. Sorry, when we use strip, the new line has been deleted here. When you are using strip, the new line which is added here, that has been removed and you got this one. So every line it adds new lines at the end. So to remove new line, we are using strip function. Our next program is to count number of times a word is occurring in a file. So for this program also, we are importing URL lib.request, URL lib.parse, URL lib.error. And the next step, as usual, is to open the file. Then we are creating a empty dictionary here using dict function. Why we are creating an empty dictionary? Because we want a key value pair wherein the key is the word and the value is number of times that word is occurring. So for that key value pair, we are using a empty dictionary here. So for each line in file handle, okay, we are retrieving each line here. Okay, so you will get this result. As usual, where you have seen, you will get each line here. For each line, okay, we want to count. We are counting this using the get function. Let us first understand what is this get function in the list. Say this example, See, I am using a website called as Greeks for the explanation. See, I am having this list and I am having an empty dictionary. So I want to retrieve each and every element of the list. So I am using for loop here. If the element is in the dictionary, at first A, if you take A is not in the DI. So DI of element is equal to 1. So DI is a dictionary. So the key of element, so DI of A is equal to 1. At first the count will be 1. If at all, see, check for the fourth element of the list. Right? The fourth element is already there in the dictionary. That is, A is, when it comes to the fourth element, A is already there in the dictionary, then the count will get increased. DI of element plus 1, the count will get increased here. So DI of A, that is the key value pairs, A's value becomes 2 here. So if it is, I'll repeat what this logic means. If already there is an element, then the count will get increased. If the element is not found in the dictionary, then we are assigning a value 1. So instead of writing this much of code, this if else code, this code has been reduced. We can reduce this code using the get function like this. So let's try to understand this get function. If the element is in the list, okay, it increments the value. Otherwise, if the element is not in the list, it assigns a default value 0 and then it increments. For example, when you are when the element is A, at the first iteration, when the element is A is not in the dictionary, then it assigns the value 0 to it and it increments the value by 1. So at the first iteration, the value of A will becomes 1. Hope you understand how the get will works. Right? So I am using get function to count the number of words in the list. So let me run this program and show you. So this is the program. See here. See, I have just modified this program. Sorry. So this is the program, but to show the number of words, I have printed again here the print statement. Let me remove this so that you will have a clear idea. See here, but has is but is there only one time, soft is one time, these 3 times. So the count of each word has been displayed. Right? So our next program. Our next module is URL lib2. See, URL lib2 works in Python 2. In Python 3, we use URL lib, but in Python 2.7, URL lib2 is available. If you are using Python 3, then use URL lib, not URL lib2. So similar to your urllib, urllib2 is a Python module that can be used for fetching URLs. urllib can handle more complex URLs openings. So under urllib2, you have the following functions: urllib open for opening the URL, and you have optional parameters called as data and timeout. And data is a string specifying additional data to send. If you want to send any additional data to the server, then you use this parameter, data parameter. And timeout is also an optional parameter which specifies a timeout in seconds for blocking operations like the connect attempt. If for connection attempt, if you want to block that, you can block for a few seconds. You can specify that time here. Under urllib2 module, you have another function called as URL encode, which takes a mapping or sequence of two tuple and returns a string in this format. urllib2 can accept a request object to set the header for the URL request, and urllib accepts only URLs. And this function returns a file object with two additional methods. You have two methods like get URL and info. Get URL returns the URL of the resource retrieved that is commonly used to determine if a redirect was followed. So like this, you will use print. See, I said urllib is used in Python 2.7. So the syntax is similar to 2.x. In 2.x, there will not be any braces after print. So print, the URL is response.getURL. And the info function will return the meta information of the page, such as header. And this function raises URL error on errors. So if you want to pass the URL, pass the URL to URL open to get file-like handle to remote data. So getting URLs, begin by importing the urllib2 module. Place the response in a variable, that is response variable. The response is like a file-like object. Read the data from the response into a string and do something with that string. So this is the example: import urllib.2 and place the website in the function called as URL open, and you will get the response object now. So using that response object, print the header information and read the see, it belongs to the response. So read the data using the response object. And if you want to print the all the data here. So this is the response object. So the request object represents the HTTP request that you are making. In its simplest form, you create a request object that specifies the URL you want to fetch. Calling URL open with the request object returns a response object for that URL. So you are sending the request object and you will get the HTTP response. So the request function under urllib2 class accepts both URL as well as parameters. So when you don't include any data, that means the request being made is actually get request. So this is the example. Import urllib2, import urllib, then specify the URL string to a variable called as URL. Then using the request function, send the request and you will get the request object. And once you send the request, if you want to catch the response, use the URL open function and send the request object in URL open. The response can be extracted using the read function of the response object. Using response object and the read function response.read, you can extract the response. Print the H response. Advanced web clients. Advanced clients of the web are those applications that do more than downloading single documents from the internet. And one of the example of advanced web client is spiders or robots. That means if you want to navigate from one URL to another URL in the web page, in that case, this advanced web programs like spider and robots are useful. See, in what way these spiders and robots are useful? For example, if you want to index into a large search engines like Google or Yahoo, then spiders and robots are useful. And if you want offline browsing, downloading documents onto your local hard disk, if you if you want to refer it afterwards, then spiders are useful. Downloading and storing for historical purpose, we use advanced web clients programming, and for web page caching to save superfluous downloading time on website revisits. If you want to save the time for again and again visiting the web pages, in that case also you'll download that pages and you'll store it. So if you want to download some URLs, or if you want to navigate through the URLs, you need to install a module called as Beautiful Soap. Install this module Beautiful Soap using PyPy, or else download the file from py4e.com. If you are downloading the file from py4e.com, you will get a zip file. Unzip that file and save that folder in the folder where you are using your Python programs. I'll show you. See here, I have saved in the same path where I have stored all my Python programs. These are all my Python programs. I have stored this BSV folder in the same folder. Right? And for using, for navigating through URLs, same, you need to import URL lib.request, but if that is you are sending the request to the server, so you need the request object, URL lib.parse, URL lib.error. All these three modules you need to import. Apart from this URL lib.request, URL lib.parse, URL lib.error, you need to import this Beautiful Soap module also. You need to import from BSV folder. So this is the program. Import URL lib.request. All this whatever modules required for my program I have imported, and I am using the data http data pr4e.org, right? And I am opening the URL for read purpose, and I'm storing that object in the variable called as HTML. Then use the Beautiful Soap functions and use HTML parser inside that parameter. So after and assign that beautiful soap to the variable called as soup. And for the retrieving the URLs, you need to retrieve the all the anchor tags. See, I'll show you this. What happened? See, this is my website, and if you see view the page source, say if I want to create this hyperlink, that hyperlink inside the HTML, we use a tag called as anchor tag, and the attribute we are using here is href, hypertext reference, and the value for this is question mark c is equal to m something. And if you see this, the value for this here href is others.txt. So we need, if you want to retrieve these URLs, you need to navigate through anchor tags. So for that purpose, inside the soup function, we are using this tag A. A stands for anchor tag. So you will get all the tags. So for tag, I want to print each and every tag. So I am keeping in the for loop, and using the get method, I am printing the value of href. So let me run this program and show you. See, all the tags has been retrieved. Whatever tags are there, and all that has been retrieved here. Right. Next comes CGI programming. CGI programming is wherein we write the programs for sending the request client programs, and prior itself I said that browser understands only HTML. So we are writing Python programs. So we embed the HTML programs inside the Python, and we write the CGI programming. So to write CGI programming, wherein we send the request to the server process it and sends the response back to the client. Right? For writing the CGI programming, we make use of a tool called as XAMPP, wherein in XAMPP, A stands for Apache Server, M stands for MySQL, P stands for PHP, and another P stands for Perl. So we don't have Python configured in XAMPP, so we need to configure Python in XAMPP. So you can do Python configuring to XAMPP like this. So you have configure here. So under configure, open this file http conf, and I already configured. Add these two lines at the end of this file. right? Add handler CGI script .py, script interpreter source, registry stick. Add these two lines to httpd config file. Save this file and close it. After that, start the Apache server. To know whether your Apache server has been correctly configured or not, okay, type localhost here. See, you got the home page of XAMPP Apache. So our configuration is, see, once you attach, now we have configured for Python, not for seeing the home page. You want to see whether Python has been configured for your XAMPP or not. So let us write a simple program and see how to write the CGI programming in Python. So to write CGI programming in Python, so, under Explorer, click on Explorer. Under htdocs folder, you create a Python file. So I have already created it. So how to write your Python? This is our first CGI Python program. See here, the first line should be the path of the Python. That means where your Python program has been installed. This is the path in my system where the Python is residing. So the first line should be your Python path. Then the second line is, say, everything I have, this is my HTML code. The HTML code I have embedded in Python programming. So for each HTML line, I have preceded with print statement. I have kept each and every HTML statement inside the print. And the second line is the content type. So the content type is text/HTML. Then I want to print just the hello onto the browser. And here I am displaying the title as first CGI program, and inside the body using h2 tag, I am printing hello. So this is my simple program to print hello onto the browser. Let us check whether the Python has been correctly configured to XAMPP or not, and let us see whether this program will execute or not. Okay. Save the file and close the file. Now to run the program, okay, type like this. I have saved it as test.py. So under localhost, my program name is test.py. See, hello has been printed, right? So this is how you write CGI programming. So that's all for today's class. Thank you.